A lot of people were impacted in our church, and I wanted to gather just a few people, part of our congregation, to share their stories and talk to us about what Harvey meant to them. And then also got an incredible guest with us today who's got some expertise in dealing with some of the stresses and some of the difficulty it takes in recovery efforts. Today, I'm glad to have someone who's been with us for a while, Miss Chiquita Davis. Chiquita was impacted big time in the storm, and she'll tell us a little bit more about her story momentarily, but she's been a part of our congregation for years and a big part of what we've been doing here in ministry. Miss Monica Nichols and Charles Nichols. Monica is a guidance counselor, and she and Charles have been married for several years now, been members here at the church. Coach Nichols is a coach at Tascasita High School as well as a teacher. And they've got, yeah, I see some Tascasita people. Charles is a deacon here at the church and has served so many people, and I'm sure it's different to be on the other side of that. And then I'm grateful today to have Miss Nettie Jones here with us. She's been practicing psychotherapy for over 15 years with a focus on women, helping women deal with issues that affect them. She's also certified in perinatal mood disorders. And maybe you're saying, once you hear her, I've heard that voice before. Well, she's got her own radio talk show called Your Life with Nettie Jones. She's the girlfriend's therapist. And she comes on 102.5 FM, Radio Houston, Galveston. Hope you'll tune in after having heard her on this morning. Today, let me say a great big welcome to each of you. Thank you for being here. Listen, I want to hear from you all. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how Harvey impacted you.
First of all, good morning. It was Saturday night. We actually got out and rode around. It was like, well, it ain't going to be that bad. I woke up Sunday morning. I saw water at the end of the street. And I was like, well, I don't think it's still going to be that bad. By 11 o'clock that night, I walked outside. It was at the driveway. Yeah, it's that bad. By 3 o'clock in the morning, it was in the house. And at that time, I was like, okay, we have to do some things. We have to prepare. So another one of our church members who lives on another street, her and my wife had been talking, and they were like, well, we need to find somewhere we can leave. And I was like, okay, it's a great suggestion you're all making, but how are we going to drive out of here? So they said, well, it's a number you can call, and somebody will come get you with a boat. I told my wife, I said, well, you all do that. I'm going to stay here. And that didn't go over too well.
I started crying.
So what we did was, I love social media for all the things it can be positive. So I put a Facebook post out there, and she was like, why would you do that? I said, right now we need help. And it took, I guess, 7 o'clock the next morning, we woke up, climbed out on the roof. Water was about 7 foot in the neighborhood, about 3 foot in the house. So I received a text from one of my fellow coaches, and he said, we can come get you. I know somebody with a boat. So I told my wife, hey, somebody's on the way with a boat. But when I told her that, I couldn't answer all the questions she had after that. So I said, you just got to be patient. So about 10 o'clock comes, and I get a text, can't get in. The current is too strong. You all going to have to walk to us. We'll meet you halfway. At that time, I told my wife, here's what we have to do. Realizing that she doesn't know how to swim, but we were going to get through this. And at this time, coach mode came out. I said, as funny as this may seem, but this is what came out. It's 4th and 1. We got to keep the ball. We can't give it back. I need you to trust me. We packed a few things in our backpacks. We stepped outside the house, and the water hit us in our waist. And I was like, okay, we can get through this.
The more we walked,
the more we
the
walked,
water got.
The water got to our neck. And I thought this. I remember standing at the altar, and Pastor said, "For better or worse." And I said, "Well, the worst is here, waiting on the better." So we do see my coach. He has a life jacket. He gives it to my wife. We make it to the boat, and that's where the fun starts. We get in the boat. I'm feeling real good about our situation, even though the neighborhood is engulfed in water. Well, the boat turns this way, and all of a sudden the boat hits a light pole. We fall out of the boat. We do get out. We do gather ourselves, and we do make it to where we need to go, where the water is low. But the one thing I saw in the midst of all that, the world will tell you that races can't get along. But I saw people who I'd never seen before, never spoken to before, help us out. The men who came and got us stayed 4 hours later getting other people out. And it was amazing because everything that I thought that was important, at that moment I realized the most important thing was right beside me, my wife.
Wow, wow.
I think for me, just disbelief. I love water, as my husband stated, but I cannot swim, but I love water, if that makes sense. We vacation a lot, and I guess I just saw at that moment that water can be so beautiful, but yet so dangerous at the same time. Like as he stated, I felt a release of comfort because friends were on the way with a boat. So I immediately got excited. However, I thought that I was going to get curbside service. I thought the boat was going to come to me. But we found out immediately that, the water was just too deep and the current was too strong and that we would have to walk. And so I just had to pray my way through it, and we made it through God's grace.
Amen.
For my husband and I, we have 2 kids, so our experience is a little different from theirs. Having to try to get 2 children together and keeping everybody calm and making sure everybody was okay. The water came up just quickly out of nowhere. Cypress Creek is right behind the house, and the water just came up. I mean, we had seen the street flood before, and that's why we had no sense of urgency to leave in the beginning. But as the water came up and it came in the backyard, it came in the back of the house before it ever came in the front. And so I'm on the phone with my mom and some other family, and everybody's, "Oh, you need to get out, call 911, they'll come and get you." And so we did that, and in the midst of it all, I was gathering some things for us to leave, because I didn't know how long we were going to be gone or anything. And so gathered some clothing together and stuff, and trying to stay calm for myself and the kids and my husband. We both trying to figure out what's going on, just in disbelief. It was a surreal situation. Never thought it would happen to us. I remember watching all the footage on TV from Katrina, and all I can remember was saying, "God, please get those people out of there." Not knowing that one day I would be one of those people that needs to be gotten out of a situation. So 5 hours after calling 911, they finally came with a boat. In the meantime, there had been boats passing by, going with people back and forth, because our whole neighborhood was underwater. And they finally came and got us, and when I stepped out of the house, because I hadn't been going outside, my husband was out, it was a foot of water in the house before we left. And so I hadn't gone out, so I didn't think it was that bad outside. But when I went out, I stepped just right outside my garage, and I was in waist-deep water. And climbed up on the boat, and we put the kids on. It was a small boat. It was only 2 places to sit, so we set the kids down on either side. And my brother-in-law was actually on the boat, because he came, he said, "I'm coming to get y'all." My husband was like, "No, you can't drive in here." And so he waited for 5 hours for us at the beginning of our neighborhood and pleaded with them, "Y'all have to go get them out. You have to go get them." And so he came and he picked up one of the kids, and my husband picked the other kid up, and I had to pull myself in the boat. There was nowhere for me to sit, so I was just kind of trying to brace myself. My husband was over me, and he was covering me with the umbrella and holding on to me, and you could feel the current. I mean, it was rough. You could see the water swirling around. I mean, it was a situation like no other, and I pray to God we never have to go through that again.
Yeah. What an interesting perspective is that, as you said, you always sit there and you see people go through challenges like this and never think it's going to be me. And you never imagine one day that would happen to us, but it does. Devastation can happen to anybody. And just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that you're going to be immune to it ever happening. So, Nettie, this is what brings us to the crux of our conversation. And one of the reasons I thought this was so important for us to talk about was that beyond replacing some of the lost items, getting contractors to fix your home and getting back in and trying to find some sense of normalcy, there's something that happens inside of us that people can't see. You can't quantify, and that's the emotional and psychological impact that devastation has. What are some of those effects?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
You know, the stories that you guys have told are incredible stories and incredible stories of courage. But one of the things I think is that, you know, our bodies are wired for emergency. We call it fight or flight. So when we're experiencing those traumatic events or situations, we kind of go in autopilot. So we know we have to figure out what to do, how to get out, where to go, and all those good things. But what happens is after the aftermath, after you've gotten to a place of safety, the emotional effects that linger on, the psychological effects that linger on. And so we often experience what's called acute stress. So that's pretty much onset stress, and it lasts for a couple of weeks. But what happens if acknowledged, if you don't acknowledge it and try to do something about it, it can manifest into something a little bit more severe. And we call that anxiety, more specifically post-traumatic stress disorder. You guys may be familiar with that. You hear it associated with veterans. People have been in the military, but it really applies to anybody that has experienced any type of trauma. Trauma is different for everybody. So a lot of us could have viewed something that's traumatic or actually walked through and experienced something that's traumatic. And so it's important. So some of the symptoms are, you know, irritability, lack of sleep, difficulty concentrating, so sleep disturbance, insomnia, sleeping too much. In addition, what we call flashbacks. Avoiding going into certain areas. You would be surprised how sensitive you become to sounds, smells. All of those things can trigger emotions and feelings. So when we talk about PTSD, it's real interesting in our community, Pastor Sloan, we don't want to talk about those things, but it is anxiety. And I always explain it as anxiety on steroids. It's excessive worry. And so if you can understand that, you can get an idea of what that might be. Knowledge is power. So if you know anybody that may have some of those symptoms, or if you experience them yourself, there are services available. Talk therapy, y'all, is good. You talk to your friends, you talk to your family all the time, but sometimes they don't have the solution or the answers. But you can go and just talk to somebody and talk about what you're experiencing.
Well, in line with that, and I'm looking out at the audience, and here's one that we didn't hit on the last service, was people who are highly impacted and maybe don't have some of the tools that we have that we've acquired over the years, and that's children who are impacted by devastation, by a storm in their life, and then they've got to go back to school and get back to normalcy. And they don't have the perspective that we have as adults. How do we help our children? Because they're probably still wrestling with it even now.
You know, we were talking about this early on after the aftermath about loss for kids, because, you know, they lost a lot of things too. A lot of them, they sound very simple, but they lost their school clothes, their backpack. Yeah. You know, if they were displaced, they didn't see friends for a while. Those things that are normal, that connection for them. But I think what's important is to talk to them and to explain to them what is going on. Be as clear as you can, and, you know, don't sugarcoat it. Of course, be age appropriate, but let them know. And I believe last service we talked about, you mentioned talking to your children, and they wanted to know, when can we go back home? When can we go back home? So you guys decided to take them so that they can see, this is why we can't come home now, but we will be coming home. So assuring them that things are going to get better. And we were talking in the break, during break, and one of the things I think as parents, you want your kids to feel safe. So I can only imagine, I've had clients share with me how during the storm, they're assuring their kids, everything's gonna be okay. We're good, everything's gonna be okay. And then you have to leave your house in a boat. So they're still thinking, well, Mom, you said everything's gonna be okay, but it's not. So the one thing I encourage you to do is to continue to tell them, yes, it is okay. It's not the same, but we're okay.
Well, and that to me, when you say we're okay, it leads to something I think is pivotal, and that's confrontation as to what's happened and what we've gone through. And that's kind of where I want to ask you all, as a part of saying, all right, after all of the adrenaline has started to die down a little bit from the days after, now you've got to do the hard work. What was the hardest part in the recovery process for you?
I think the hardest part for me was going back in the neighborhood and seeing all the homes. In my neighborhood, every home that was a single flat, everything was lost. And when we had to deal with going in, seeing all your belongings and things, but then that's when something kicked in my head. Okay, we got to clean up. We got to do this. 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 We do this. Because I just wanted a sense of normalcy. So I took off work one day. I got a few former football players to help me clean up. And we were throwing away things, and I'm an avid sports person. And I have a magazine collection of Sports Illustrated from 1982 to the present. So I was going through and I was throwing them away. And at that moment, I felt God tell me, slow down. And so I started throwing them away bit by bit. And all of a sudden, I came across my father's 70th birthday. It's a picture album, and I lost my father in 2010. And at that moment, I sit down, I look through these pictures, I had all these memories, and I felt God just saying, even in the midst of tragedy, there's always hope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I think for me, it was going back to work. I'm a high school counselor, and so I felt like I needed to be okay in a good state of mind before I can be any service to my kids. I just wanted to be at home. I felt like if I was at home, I could have control. Where he was ready to go back to work, I wanted to stay at home because I felt like if I was at home, I could make calls, I could get a head start on trying to contact contractors and interview them, and I just wanted to sit and think about the process. I know that was adding probably additional stress than what I needed, but my mind and I was already spinning like, what would this rebuilding process, what is it gonna look like? How long is it gonna take? And I just felt like I couldn't get that done at work. And so I found that it was a struggle for me to, go back to work.
Okay.
The hardest thing for me was to go in the neighborhood day in and day out and see everybody's stuff all on the curb for extended periods of time. And I can remember telling my husband, God, I wish they would just come and get this trash. I think it'd be better if they just come pick up the trash. It would be a whole lot better. Because people's lives your life is your home, and all of your things are out on the curb. And I think that was the hardest thing for me to have to deal with. And then looking at, okay, we have this is gone, that's gone, we have to do this, we have to do that, and then I stop and I say, you know what, just stop. We're gonna take this thing one day at a time. Yeah. We can't repair it all at once. It won't be all back together at once. We have to take one step at a time. And when people ask me, well, how are you? How are you? I'm taking it one day at a time.
Wow, yeah. I mean, how is it when you finally get to that point where you say, all right, this really did happen? Because for the longest you're saying, this has got to be a dream. This has got to be, this is so devastating. Please, God, tell me that this is not really happening. And then you come to a point where you see stuff out there and you're like, this really did. Now, how do I go on? Well, Nettie, is there a first step that you tell us? I mean, from a psychotherapist's point of view, if I've gone through something, I've dealt with devastation, something's happened in my home, in my family, in my personal life, on my job, and I've got to get up and go on, is there like one or two steps that we have to take?
You know, as you guys were talking, you said you go outside and you see all of the things on the lawn, and what came to mind was rebuilding. And if it's rebuilding your home or rebuilding anything that's been devastating in your life, if it's a relationship, if it's your job, if it's something with your children, I think of what am I learning about myself? Not what am I learning about the other person, what am I learning about what do you do for a hurricane, but what am I learning about myself in this position? And that's where I think you can start to rebuild. You rebuild from the inside out, like you're doing your home. You're doing room by room, step by step. It's a process, so this might be an opportunity to not only rebuild the place where you reside, but also the place of yourself and who you are. One of the things I talk about in my practice and on the show is about vulnerability. That's one place that we don't like to go. That's one experience we don't like to have. But vulnerability is a place of surrender. God abides there. And I believe we can be reflective. And I also believe you find wisdom there. And that's kind of like the wind beneath your wings, where you can soar and you become stronger. So I think being reflective, knowing what you're learning about yourself, and start the rebuilding process. It's an opportunity to kind of tweak some stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's some stuff you wish you could have done over or done differently. And so now God says, okay, let's try it again. So we were talking about this in the break, and I pinpointed one person, but I'm going to open it up to everybody. Because they've all got jobs in which they relate to people and try to encourage people and kind of help them navigate difficult places in their life. Coach, counselor, social worker. So now you're sitting in the other chair. Now you're looking across at you. What do you tell you about going through loss and devastation or something like this? How do I get through this?
Well, my grandmother, who's 97, she taught me this at an early age, and I would tell myself, if it was sitting across from myself, you're better going through it than around it.
Right.
Because when you see where you start and to see where you end, you'll see God having his hand on you the whole way through it.
Can you say that one more time? That was just so powerful. Really?
Yeah. Because, and there were some times that I was riding to work and we questioned God. God, why me? Why us? And then I could hear her saying, my grandmother, why not y'all? Because he was stretching us, You can't grow if you've never been uncomfortable.
I second that. But no, in all honesty, I guess I really do share the same thoughts. Why not me? You go through the storm for a blessing to come out on the other side. So, I trust God, and I trust that, what you're doing, and, everything is according to your will, so.
Yeah.
And I would say that, I would say to myself that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to receive help.
Yes.
It's okay that when somebody says, I want to help you, to accept it. Because I tell my children all the time, because my daughter, if she has a problem in school, she doesn't raise her hand. I say, you know what? A smart person asks for help. All the time. And before they get out of the car in the morning, I said, what does mommy say? A smart person asks for help. And they receive help. And so that's really the biggest thing for me, to know that I can get help, whether it be physically, financially, emotionally, mentally, it's okay to ask for help.
Absolutely. Well, tell us, what were some of you all's support systems during the storm? I know I saw some of your posts and things. Again, you referred to social media, and people just came out from everywhere coming together to help one another.
I think the biggest support system is where we are, the church. I mean, I heard from church members, and you know, Chiquita said something that was tough for me, was accepting help. Because as men, we are problem fixers. So when someone asks us for, ask us how can they help you, that was tough. But I heard from classmates that I hadn't seen since high school. They were sending letters. I remember one letter that said, "We weren't affected, but you were, and you were part of us." Our support for me came when school started. I needed to have some normalcy. I needed to go to class. I needed football practice to take place. I needed games to take place. So for all that, the support, our prayer life, my praying partners, I needed all that. And what was ironic is the more I prayed, it seemed like the littlest things that used to drive me crazy didn't even matter.
And I think for me, my support was obviously us, but our prayer life and my prayer partners and our church family, sorority sisters, friends, family. Just kind of touching on what Shaquita said, that was very powerful. I wasn't even thinking about that. My husband shared at the service earlier, I didn't want us to put it on Facebook. I asked him why. I don't want anybody to know we're going through this. And so, it ended up being a blessing. And as, we've all shared, just this situation has been a blessing. Just the overwhelming support and the love and, just being humble enough to, just let people love on you and help you. So it's just been a blessing, and we're very grateful and thankful.
Of course, for me, my family, my church family, I hadn't been in the choir that long before Harvey hit. And before I knew it, I had my fellow soprano sisters call in and they come to help. And one of them, her car kept breaking down and her battery, and it was this and that. She said, "But I'm coming." She kept texting me, "I'm coming. My car is this." She kept calling, and she made it. She made it to me despite going through everything that she had to go through to get to me. She got there. And my sorority sisters, just people, even support system from neighbors. Many of my neighbors, I would just see them and wave, but got the opportunity to meet some people and learn some names, and we depend on each other and talk with each other, because we know, I know exactly what they're going through and know what I'm going through as well, because from dealing with the storm itself to dealing with contractors who don't do right all the time. But we know we're supporting each other in that.
Yeah. Well, last question. Nettie, we were talking about this also in the break. Is that, my wife's real big on preparation kits, storm kits. When you get ready to go through a storm, do you have the generator? Do we have, bags ready to go? Because we know that this area is prone to hurricanes. And if you know that hurricane season is a certain time, then there's this challenge to be ready, because a storm is very likely. What do you do? So for many of us, we all have storms in our life, but there's a certain sense of preparedness that we have to do in our emotional and certainly in our spiritual life. Anything we need to make sure is in that preparation kit?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that question. One of the things, I am so big on self-care. That's adequate sleep, okay, hydration, proper diet, and some exercise. And the reason I say that is because, and of course your emotional wellness is very important, because there will be a storm in your life or storms in your life. So you need to be physically fit. You need to be able to get up and move. Okay, you need to have stamina. So as Pastor Sloan mentioned, we do the preparedness kit. So we have the water, we have the non-perishables. We talked about how having your insurance, your ID, all of those things in plastic bags ready to go, but you need to be physically able to get up and endure and to go. And if we can't get up and move around because we're not mobile, because we're not active, that can, literally be the difference between life and death. So as you prepare, be very concerned about your health, your self-care. Go to your follow-up doctor's appointment. Get yourself checked out. Make sure you do some type of movement, some type of exercise. And also, minimize your stress. Live in the moment. Today is all we have, this very moment. Yesterday is gone, tomorrow's not here. We stress over what's already happened, what we didn't do, why we didn't do it. Now we're worried about what we're gonna do, when we need to do it, and it's not there yet. But we're missing out on what we have, which is today, this very moment. So, self-care, take care of yourself, and just be prepared and stay prayed up. Yeah. Stay prayed up.
Take care of yourself, and again, realize storms come. You live in areas, not just geographically, but in our personal life that is prone to storms. And something that they said earlier was that I figured out that going through it was a whole lot better than going around it, because what I get while I go through is much more than I could have ever got if I tried to avoid it. And God doesn't allow anything to happen just simply by coincidence. God allows certain things to happen in life so that there's always a pattern of growth that takes place in us. How will you grow? How will you become stronger? How will you become better? What will you get out of it? We get the best of Harvey. Harvey will not get the best of us. A couple of resources I want to let you know just before we get out of here. Houston Galveston Institute provides free counseling services to families affected by Harvey. They're on Richmond Avenue. I hope that you'll check them out at www.talkhgi.org. And also there's the Family Services of Greater Houston. They've got multiple locations. Then he mentioned to us about psychotherapy, about having a counselor, or therapist. Mental Health America, that's at www.mentalhealthamerica.net. Now that's a big one for us, because we are convinced we will not bury our heads in the sand, as many do in the African American community, and try and act like mental illness doesn't affect us. It does. You're telling the story. You're fooling yourself. It's all around the coffee table and the table when you go to the family reunion. Look, it's all around there, and you call it different names, but it's there. And the best thing you could do is get the help that you need. Nothing wrong with asking for help. Nothing wrong with it. Yeah. And then care providers, again, that's therapists, psychologists, and psychotherapists. Here's a great one right here as well, specializing in women and intimacy and helping women with challenges. Thank y'all. Thank you for being vulnerable, and thank you for being informative. Would y'all help me to celebrate them?